Good morning. It is Thursday and it is 11 a.m. So that means I'm here for handling problem tenants like a boss. So you probably got my email this morning that alerted you of some problems that I'm seeing come through, and it's a lot. I don't know what's going on, that maybe it's the end of the moratorium or people starting to hear the end of the moratorium. But what I'm finding that's most common right now is that people are taking the information that they want to hear and they're taking that and turning that into whatever legal advice that they're giving themselves. So they're taking something like, oh, eviction moratorium ends June 30th. So that interprets maybe, oh, okay, it can serve a 60-day notice that ends June 30th. Even for commercial properties, I'm hearing commercial tenants say that the moratorium ends June 30th, and it doesn't. For commercial tenants, it doesn't end until August. I'm hearing so many different things that people are kind of making up on their own. And I want to emphasize that this is not the time to Google what you're trying to find the answer to, because more likely than not, you can find the answer that will satisfy what you want to hear. And that's not what the law is about. The law is about tried and true cases and what is happening in court, specifically what's happening in your local court, in your local county. And that's what we do. We do evictions. We specialize in evictions, and we are focused on giving you the right information, not the piece of information that you're Googling until you find it and somebody tells you what you want to hear. And that's what I'm finding the most often, is that people are doing things on their own. They've been doing things on their own for a long time. I've been saying for definitely over the past year and during COVID that you need to hire a professional property manager to manage your property for you. And people still aren't. That's fine if they're not doing that. But those are the people who are really starting to be at risk. This week was a little bit different, though, because I did have a property manager who works on behalf of somebody else. And that property owners who called me with a 60-day notice that they served. And every single thing that they did about the 60-day notice was wrong. It made the property put the property manager in a very tough position, and the property owner, because the property manager did everything wrong in the situation, everything they shouldn't have done. And the tenant somehow knew, because the tenant can Google it also. However, all the rights are on the tenant side and not the landlord side. Tenant Googled it. Tenant hired an attorney. And so the attorney contacted the property manager and said, no longer contact the tenant. I'm now on this case. And so, of course, that's when the owner came to me and said, I need help. Well, of course you need help, because somebody was not understanding that there is an eviction moratorium. So I want to emphasize, an eviction moratorium means that you cannot do evictions. There are no evictions. There are no evictions. There is a hold on evictions. However, I am able to do some evictions. The majority of the time, I can't do evictions. The number of evictions that I do are so minimal at this point. There are things and strategies that I can do and help people with. But at the end of the day, I am not really evicting many people at all. Definitely not like in normal times. During COVID, when it first hit, I suppose, from March up until March until October 5th, we couldn't do anything. There were no evictions at all. So that's your true moratorium. Then people hear courts are open and people are starting to do evictions. No, we're talking about minimal evictions that are happening at that point. Just because eviction courts are open again does not mean that the reasons that we can evict even exist anymore. So there seems to be some sort of discrepancy between the eviction courts being open and people thinking that we can just do evictions again. We cannot. That is not what the scenario is. Our normal eviction caseload in a regular month is about 50 to 60 evictions a month. Right now, we are doing less than 5 a month, okay? If I could do evictions, I would do evictions, but I can't do evictions. We can do things like notices, we can have some strategies, but most of the time we're waiting for this moratorium to end. So when I hear that people are out there serving their own notices, serving 60 days, serving 3 days, getting notices from tenants, be careful. I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to be so careful right now, because there is a moratorium and everything is scrutinized way more diligently than it ever was before in the past. There are the tenants who are getting free legal advice. There are the landlords who have to pay a lot more for legal advice and for legal counsel because of this moratorium. So you need to be very careful. So if you are a property manager and have not stayed up to date, then you need to make sure that you're hiring someone else to do your notices for you. If you're a self-managing landlord, fine. Do not serve any notices to your tenant, and even be careful with your communication with them, because you want to make sure that you are not showing some form of discrimination or retaliation if they are claiming that COVID is an issue. So I'm going to walk you through what I am seeing right now and how you need to stop it. If you fit in any of these categories, please stop what you're doing and please hire a professional. This includes property managers, it includes real estate agents, it includes self-managing landlords. Please hire someone else to do this for you if you are not 100% capable of doing it on your own. My top property managers who come to me and I send out referrals, they are hiring me for their notices. They are not doing them on their own. They're 60 days. So you should not either. These are people who manage thousands of doors. You should not be doing it either. So let's get started. Number one, people are calling me after the fact. So they're calling me and saying, I served a 60-day notice. It's coming up due. They're not saying anything about the moratorium. They're just saying my 60-day notice is coming up due and I want to start the eviction. Can you take a look at it? So I look at it and it's bad. It's a bad notice. So what makes it a bad notice? Well, there are only 4 reasons that you can issue a 60-day notice right now, or a 30-day. A 30-day if somebody's been there less than a year and is not in a lease. A 60-day you can issue for 4 reasons if they're not in a lease as well. If they're in a lease, it doesn't matter what your reason is. You cannot get them out. They're in a fixed term lease. So those 4 reasons, whatever reason you choose, there are only certain reasons you can choose of those 4. Most people can only pick 2 of those reasons. You need to state one reason on the notice. You need to say the civil code of procedure that you are using as a reference for the reason that you're giving them the termination notice. You need to include a section about the right to reclaim abandoned property. That is a huge section of a 60-day notice that I often do not see on any of these notices that people are handwriting or typing saying, hey, you need to get out of the property. That's not on there. Of course, the owner or property manager needs to sign it, needs to date it as well. And important piece, they are entitled to 1 month relocation right now. Every single property in the state is covered by AB 1482. Again, if you don't know what that is, you should not be serving notices. 1482 is statewide just cause. It means you cannot kick someone out of a property without a reason. There is a list of specific reasons. However, all of those reasons have gone away during the eviction moratorium because there is a moratorium. You cannot evict during this time. All those reasons went away. However, February 1st, the state amended the original COVID Tenant Protection Act, and they brought 4 reasons that you could issue a termination notice. We did not have those. From March until February 1st, there was no reason that you could issue a termination notice or a notice of non-renewal. Now, you still cannot issue a notice of non-renewal, but you can serve a 60-day for one of 4 reasons. So the first is if there are substantial repairs to the property that make it uninhabitable that the city is requiring you to fix. Okay, then we're basically talking about close to a red tagged property. The city's saying you better fix this or else. Then you can give a termination notice to them. Yes, relocation is required. If this is tenant protection ordinance or in any of the counties that have more strict tenant legislation, then there are going to be differences there also. Again, don't serve these notices on your own. You need a professional. This is a very challenging time right now. So substantial repairs. I would hope that you're not kicking anybody out because the property needs substantial repairs. So that means that issue has gone away. That's not an option for you. Number 2, and this is the most common one that we are doing 60-day notices for, is withdrawal from the rental market. That means you are taking the property off the rental market. Okay, it doesn't matter who moves into it, but you can't rent it out again. You can sell it after, but again, you are not removing them in order to sell it. Your reason is because you are withdrawing the property from the rental market. You simply don't want to be a landlord anymore, and that is the only communication that you're giving to your tenant. I don't want to be a landlord anymore. Be careful here because I'm starting to hear people say, I want to do a 1031 exchange on it. Well, you probably can't in this scenario, and I'm not a real estate agent. However, if you're officially saying I'm taking this property off the market, then you're going to go and buy another property and exchange it that way, then you may have it may not be possible because if you're removing it, it's no longer a rental property and it needs to be a rental property in order to do a 1031 exchange. And so I would not use withdrawal from the rental market for that option. Also to note, if you withdraw it from the rental market, it must be off the rental market for 2 to 3 years or 2 to 3 tax cycles before you can put it back on. I get a lot of people saying, but how do they really know if the property goes back on the market or not? Well, it comes down to how savvy your tenant is. If you feel like your tenant is sitting around all day and looking for every little hole that they can dig and pick at so that they can stay there longer or sue you somehow, then that's probably the tenant that's going to go back in maybe 6 months, a year, 3 months, and see who's living at the property. See if it's for sale. See if it did sell, if there are now tenants in there. So if you choose to sell the property after you withdraw it from the rental market, then that's another thing to know. You need to sell it to somebody who intends to buy it as an owner-occupied property. You do not want to sell it to somebody who is going to use it as an investment because you chose to withdraw it from the rental market for 2 to 3 years. That means your buyer also cannot use it as a rental property for 2 to 3 years. So these are some important things to note. Number 3. Now, numbers 3 and 4 require you to have served a notice of exemption of AB 1482. Yes, I said that every property in the state of California is covered by 1482 right now. However, in order for these number 3 and 4 to qualify, you need to have also served that notice of exemption that maintains your exemption from statewide just cause. So basically on January 1st, 2020, the state passed statewide just cause. That means that you can't kick out a tenant. You can only kick out a tenant for a reason. Now, there were only specific properties that were covered by that, and it was based on ownership and year built and things like that. However, every property in California became covered by 1482 if you did not issue this exemption prior to August 1st, 2020. So if you did not issue that exemption, then you cannot use numbers 3 and 4. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, if you don't know what the exemption is, then 3 and 4 do not qualify for you. If you do know what I'm talking about, then we can keep on going. I will have more after that as well, but I really want to emphasize that notice of exemption. There's not one specific form that needed to be used. You could use a CAR form, you could use a CAA form. There were different forms that were floating around, and that's fine. You just had to have issued it before a certain date, or you had to have it incorporated into your lease if it was after, I believe, July 1st, 2020. So if you have a tenant who moved in after August 1st, 2020, then it would have needed to be incorporated into your lease at that time. So if it's not incorporated into your lease, then your property is covered by statewide just cause, and you cannot use items 3 and 4 as your reason. So let's go into number 3. Number 3 is owner move-in. So that means the owner or a very specific list of people. I believe it's grandparents, it's children, it's not siblings, it's not cousins, it's not your aunt's mother's in-law. It's very specific on who it is, but it's owner move-in. It's the same thing on this one. It's that you have to be on the property for 2 to 3 years. Whoever's moving into the property, it's no longer a rental property. So that's one way that you can get that 60-day. And then the final one is if the property is for sale, if it is, and it intends to be owner occupied. Again, this is something that would need to be in place for 2 to 3 years as well. So you can't have somebody who buys it and says, oh, this is going to be my primary residence, and then they move out 2 months later. So that's the 4th notice. Numbers 3 and 4, you needed to have served the notice of exemption, or it needed to be incorporated into your lease. If those didn't happen, then you only have substantial remodel or withdrawal from rental market. Okay. So AB 1482, that notice of exemption, sometimes I see it, most of the time I don't, and I see some really bad forms out there. So remember, you need one of those 4 reasons if you're going to issue a termination notice, a 60-day notice. Some bad reasons. I'm seeing people respond to tenants saying, well, these are the reasons that we are giving you a termination notice. They include, you've been paying late, or you owe me too much rent, or I can't pay the mortgage because you're not paying me the rent, or the tenant's not responding and ignoring them completely, and so they're mad, or the tenants are breaking the rules. So I'll get back to breaking the rules in just a second. But all of these other things, you have to be careful because tenants are protected under the COVID Tenant Protection Act. From the time period of March 1, 2020 until June 30th, 2021, tenants are protected. How much they pay, how little they pay, what you can report to future landlords, all of that is extremely, extremely protected. So you need to be careful if these are any of the scenarios that you're facing right now in your with any of your tenants. So that's why you don't want to give a reason. You just want to be very, very straightforward. Most of you are going to be able to use withdrawal from the rental market if you're not in a lease. And if you are using that, it's just, I don't want to be a landlord anymore. That's it. You don't want to get deep. You don't want to get detailed because you go into these other things and it could be seen as discriminatory. And if it's seen as discriminatory, then you could get sued. or if it's seen as retaliatory. If the tenant's given you a declaration and said, I can't afford to pay the rent, of course, we all know they don't have to have a reason. They just need to give you the declaration. Then they're protected until the moratorium ends. Even in that situation, that is considered retaliation if then you're giving them a notice because they're not paying the rent. So you want to be very, very neutral. This has always remained, whether we had even before the eviction moratorium, you don't want to give a reason because you don't want them to use that against you in court. This is the reason people go to attorneys, and attorneys say, I will take that case because they know they can win it if they have discrimination or retaliation in there. So I want to go to breaking rules. If you are giving a 60-day notice because someone is breaking the rules, why? Why are you waiting so long? If they're breaking the rules and it's that bad, why are you giving a 60-day notice? You give them a warning notice. Then you give them a 3-day notice to quit, and then you start your eviction. So I bet it's because you still want to collect the rent. So you have to pick. If it's about breaking the rules, then you don't need a 60-day notice. It's about breaking the rules, and you do a notice to quit. And also, you can't issue a 60-day right now for breaking the rules. So it would need to be warning notices and notices to quit. Again, don't do this on your own. Okay. And if you're doing that 60-day notice, you have to give them 1 month relocation fee. Now, there are 2 ways you can do it. One is you can write them a check, a cashier's check, and give it to them within 15 days of serving the notice. Or in the notice, you can state that they do not need to pay the last 30 days of rent that they are due. On a side note, if they do not pay the last 30 days they won't pay the last 30 days. And if they also do not move out, then we can go to court and get a judgment against them also for that last 30 days. Another thing I want to note, when we're starting an eviction on a 60-day notice, we are not claiming any rent. Okay. All COVID rent is protected. So there are certain ways that you can collect that and certain ways that you can't. We cannot get you a judgment for that money during COVID if you are starting an eviction based on a 60-day notice. Because when you serve a 60-day, you assume that everything else is fine in a property. And if it's not fine, and this really is about the rent, then you should have a 15-day notice out there. And if you have a 15-day notice and they return a signed declaration, then you can't do anything. And people are having a really hard time understanding that they can't do anything. Yes, California took all those rights away from you. I've been posting in this group about all of the things that you can do to tell, especially the city of San Jose, how you've been impacted as a landlord. And I got to tell you, I only heard back from one person. Only one landlord responded and copied me on a letter that they sent to the city. So if you guys are mad about this, and you should be infuriated, then you should be writing letters so that they hear from you, because I guarantee you the tenants are complaining and they're worried that they're going to get evicted. So they're hearing from them right now. And that's why this moratorium may be extended. So I wanted to emphasize those 4 reasons you can serve a 60-day notice. Part of the reason I'm preparing this video and going into things that I've actually talked about before, and I'm being very, very serious in it this time, is because of the massive amount of emails that I'm getting saying, I served a 60-day, here it is, what do you think? And then they have a lot of questions. So that requires a consultation if it's not something I can answer through an email. But then when I send an email back and I say, you're probably going to have to serve a new 60-day or rescind the old 60-day and maybe do a new one based on these other reasons, or based on this other reason, or your reason isn't good in the first place, you can't do that. Like, we may have to deal with a retaliatory or a discrimination case. So I'm on here letting you know to share this, because this is really, really important for any property owner. So if you know someone who manages rental property, I can guarantee you that they're really, really close to serving a 60-day if they haven't already, or maybe a 30-day, or maybe even a 3-day, or maybe they're getting free forms from the county for 15 days. Have them stop, because they're causing more lost time and energy doing it on their own. So that is what I wanted to sum up today. If anyone has any questions, now is the time to post them. I see that Kate is over there tagging everybody. So we've got people here. But I would love to know if you are a property manager, if you are a property owner, if you are a real estate agent, and who you think that this is going to help with the most, because this information I am preparing mainly based on all the questions I get each week. So it's June 10th. People were serving notices, I believe, so that they can start evictions at the end of June or beginning of July, when the eviction moratorium is scheduled to end. Last week, I talked about why I don't think it's going to end and what you can do in preparation for it possibly not ending. I also have a new free PDF available for download on our website. And it is things you can and can't do during an eviction moratorium and things you maybe can do during an eviction moratorium. The maybe is exactly what I covered in this content today. So it's those 4 pieces of maybe. So go to evictionservicecenter.com and you can download that free PDF and you can share that. I know that a lot of property managers struggle because they want to take this exact information that I've said and give it to their property owners because the property owners aren't understanding. So today, this particular video, I will be putting on my website so the people who aren't on Facebook can still see it, because I've received a lot of those requests, and normally I just go live in here and keep everyone in this specific area. However, that I will take online. So if you have any questions, you can add them to the comments here. If you appreciated this or you liked this video, then please add a thumbs up. Tell me if you're a property manager, property owner, or real estate agent. And I will be back next week with more industry news. And let's get ready for the eviction moratorium. And we will let you know if anything changes before June 30th. Have an awesome day, everyone. See you next week.